The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. In January of 2011, the city discovered extremely high levels of a known carcinogen in a building that had been used as a public school for 20 years. As troubling as that news was, it was compounded by the fact that the city did not tell parents about their findings for the next 6 months and permitted children, teachers, and staff to be breathing the air of that toxic site every day for 6 months. To make it even further, to this day, there has not been a conclusive report from the Department of Health on the dangers of this toxic school. The school was the Bronx New School, PS 51, at that time located at 3220 Jerome Avenue and Van Cortlandt Avenue East. And tonight we'll have two parents of children who attended that school, and on the phone, an attorney who specializes in this kind of toxicity in schools. If you'd like to add in your questions or comments, then call in at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. For now in our studio, it's a former PA president of PS 51, Lois Haar. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. And the originator of some of the organizing efforts, PS 51 Parents United, along with the NWBCCC, it's Jeanette Sosa. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. And on the phone from California, it's the executive director of the Center for Public Environmental Oversight, Lenny Siegel. Good evening, Mr. Siegel. Thank you for joining us. Do we have Mr. Siegel, or we'll catch him along the way? Okay. Let's just start right here. Ms. Sosa, why don't you just tell me what happened as a parent of a child who attended the school. And before you start, I should mention my daughter also attended that school. So for me, there is a personal nature, a personal aspect of this I can't deny. But my daughter was not in school at that time. Your children were. Yeah. Tell me about what happened, how it unfolded, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I was actually away and received notification from my former director of the Northwest Bronx telling me that there was a notice put out by the media that PS 51 was closing. From there is where I started contacting other parents that I was aware of, and we found out that during that 6 month period from January to June, they were doing testing because the lease was up for that actual site. And during the testing, that's when they found high levels, which was 10,000 over the limit that the state guidelines.
Of TCE, which I understand is trichloroethylene. Okay, I want to get it right. Trichloroethylene, which is a known carcinogen. But, you know, there's so many aspects of this that are frankly disturbing. So they found out about it in January, but then they didn't inform any parents till June. And what you said you heard from the media as opposed to, let's say, getting a notice or calling to a meeting.
What we found out was the first testing was done in January. And they found some levels that were of concern. And then in March, they did another testing where they removed the floorboards. That's when they definitely knew that there was a serious problem. but there was no notification within that time frame that that was happening inside the school.
Now, some of the excuses, and I've gone through some of the things that they've said, is that basically we didn't have conclusive tests or anything like that. Do you buy any of that, or do you think somebody in the DOE looked at some information and said, aha, what do we do about this? And their conclusion was let's not do anything till we're done in June.
No, I don't buy it. It was conclusive enough that they made a decision without notifying not even the staff of the school that they boarded up the building.
Lois Har, let's bring you into the dialogue. So now you heard, like I did, frankly, that this was going on at the school, but you became more active recently. Why is that?
Right, well, partly it was when somebody talked to me and organized me, I suppose. I was at a coalition, Northwest Bronx Coalition party, their gala celebration last fall, I guess it was late fall, and I met another member of PS 51 Parents United, Marisol Carrera, and she started to talk to me about it and said, I'm going to tell you when the next meeting is and I want you to come. And so I started coming, I guess, just after the first of the year, and started listening and learning.
That's the first of this year.
First of this year, right, yes.
So what have you learned, and what is raising red flags for you that makes it worth having a TV show about?
Sure. Well, I guess there's a few things. I mean, one is what Jeanette explains is, first of all, there were children who were left there while they knew that there was something really wrong. But to be perfectly honest, my own self-interest, I guess, is that my daughters are grown women in their 20s now, but they were there in the 90s, and this problem existed then as it does now. And so I'd like to know what the possible impact of that is on them and their lives. I'd like to see what the results of the studies that have been being done by public authorities, and get those studies out and released. And someone like Lenny, who we may be talking with, he can help translate that for us, I think, because it's kind of technical stuff.
We're going to bring him into the conversation in about 2 seconds. Jeanette, for you, at this point, why doesn't someone like Lois, and frankly me, have answers as to what the potential risk is for our children? You know, what do we need to know? I mean, and I'm going to be honest with my viewers, I attended a meeting just the other night, and I raised my hand and said, well, wait a minute, so why don't we know? I mean, what's your reaction
Well, for
to that?
one, I want to put out there that the Department of Education is no longer at the table feeling that they're responsible or accountable to continue communicating with us. Current
Why
and
is that?
former parents.
I mean, what is the point
They just
about
feel
that?
like they've done their job.
In other words, the children are out of that
The
building.
children out of
it's
the
now
building,
somebody-
they no longer have any responsibility, especially to former parents. But in regards to any health report, there's a discrepancy in regards to what the results are from that health report. So it's not being released to us at all.
Sounds like
If I
it's,
could-
go ahead.
I was going to say, just to add to what Jeanette's saying, I think there's the New York State Department of Health and the federal agency that have been both looking at the data. They disagree about the severity of the problem. And the federal guidelines are much stricter than New York State's guidelines, which I found interesting, because often the state is strict on things. But in this case, the EPA says the situation is a lot worse than New York State. So they're kind of disagreeing about, as they call it, the science.
Well, I
The
can't wait.
science.
I can't wait till we bring Mr. Siegel in. But I'm going to just express, as a parent, I don't really care who thinks the numbers are legal or not legal, or worse or not worse. I want to know if that was the level of contamination that was there. What is the effect on my child, even if it was legal? I mean, for goodness'
Now
sake.
you know why I
That's
go
all
to
I-
the meetings, Gary.
Maybe I ought to go a little more often. All right, Mr. Siegel, put this in context for us, if you will. Is this, you know, I don't want to even think, common? Is this, well, this happens? I mean, where is this particular situation in the context of toxicity in schools that is found in the state or throughout the country?
It's somewhat unusual, but not unique. What happened at this school is called vapor intrusion, and that's when they're called volatile organic compounds that are in the groundwater or soil beneath the building are sucked up by the difference in vapor pressure in the building and underneath. So what you had is contamination that was under the building, as far as we know, for the entire life of the school, because it was contamination that was released there by the former lamp factory.
Yes.
And as far as we know, it depends upon the weather, the time of year, and all that. The occupants of the school were exposed to unacceptable levels of trichloroethylene throughout that time.
And they were exposed because they were breathing air that the
Right.
particles were in the air. So they were,
Right.
it wasn't like in one room because the air, of course,
It's
is...
fumes, not particles. And part of the problem, as far as we can tell, is the school was not well ventilated, which may have been the source of other health problems.
One PS51 teacher, as I understand, is suing the DOE for birth defects her unborn child suffered while she worked at the school. Does this have merit? I mean, is there a way to prove this? And is this I hate to think, the kind of thing that parents like myself, Ms. Haar and Jeanette, or is this just, a frivolous kind of suit?
It may have merit. I don't know the particulars of the child, but trichloroethylene is both a cancer-causing substance and a substance that has non-cancer health effects. And when U.S. EPA came out with its toxicity assessment for TCE in September 2011, they found that TCE at very low levels, the number they use is 2 micrograms per cubic meter in a residential setting, as opposed to the 50 or 51 that was inside the school, is capable, it will increases the risk of cardiac birth defects for women who are pregnant while in the building. And there's a study in Endicott, New York, showing an association of cardiac birth defects and people in buildings, not necessarily schools, but in residences, where the levels of TCE were elevated.
What do you make of this discrepancy that Ms. Haar talked about, that the EPA and New York State disagree on, the significance of the findings? Do you react like I react? Like, I don't care if they agree or disagree. I just want to know, what's the status of, the health of my children and any children?
Well, New York has weaker standards than many other states like New Jersey and California. And on TCE, their levels, protective levels for cancer are 1/10 as protective as U.S. EPA's. And EPA has done a more recent and more exhaustive study. While New York State has a fairly good program for going out and looking for vapor intrusion, particularly upstate, their standards cannot be justified at this point.
And what is the status of a report that I had mentioned that, and these women here in the studio have mentioned that they're waiting for, and is this unusual? Should there be or shouldn't there be a report already to at least let parents who are concerned, and maybe even the youngsters who are concerned, have some real idea of what the risk is?
Well, the rumor we've heard is there's a dispute between the New York State Department of Health and the Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry.
As to what the effects of this situation might be.
As to what standard to use in interpreting what the effects might be. These reports do take a while. They're difficult. While we know that exposure to TCE increases risk, to quantify it, how long people have to be in the building for it to have an effect, that's arguable. Nevertheless, this is taking quite a while, and it should be out. What they normally do is they publish a draft. People can comment on it. They should have done that a while ago.
One question for you, again, putting it in context. Do you find that this happens periodically with these kinds of things, that it takes a while and then there is a delay? Or is this particularly late in relation to the kinds of reports that might come out in other municipalities over incidents like this?
Historically, it's getting a good health consultation out takes time, but I've seen one like it's not a school, but an indoor baseball practicing facility near Boston, where there was a much more rapid response and a fairly good report done by the federal agency.
So let's put it this way: it's not the worst, certainly not the best.
Usually what you have is parties who are responsible for causing the problem are worried that somebody's going to sue them, and in fact people are, and so there's pressure to tone these things down. This is a pretty clear case that people ought to be held accountable.
Jeanette, let's talk a little bit about what is next for you. I mean, can you do anything? Have you, taken any action, or is there really nothing to do until this report comes out and you have something more to go on?
There's always still stuff to do. Always.
That's the Bronx that I love.
No.
Go ahead, tell me what it is that you're
We're
working on.
definitely still continuing to apply the pressure.
Pressure for what?
Pressure to ensure that they are going to release the report.
Okay.
At the community board meeting, along with PS 51 and Northwest Bronx, it was stated to us by the Department of Health that a report should be out by May, no more than June. So it's going to be our job as parents to ensure that that's happening and to apply the pressure that needs to be released.
Lois, as I understand, and then we're going to bring Mr. Siegel back into this, as I understand it, this is not the only situation the school has. And the way that this school happened was the city needed a place for a new school. They found a warehouse. Turns out it was an old lamp factory. And then they didn't do, it appears, due diligence before they put children in the building. Is this a common kind of thing? And should parents who are watching us right now say, gee whiz, there's a new school, it's in a building that maybe once was a warehouse or a factory, has the proper studies been done? What's your thought about that?
That's the issue. I think that's what's referred to as the leasing loophole. So, for instance, in this situation like this building, the 3200 Jerome at the Bronx New School, it was an existing structure used for 100 years or 80 years for other purposes. And when it was leased, there was some very rudimentary studies done or observations made.
Like, hey, we need a building, put them in
this
here.
This looks okay, and there was an architect and people worked on it, moved the kids in. If they were building a school, for instance, the new school right down along the railroad near around 205th Street, that'll be for the Bronx Charter School, that's a new construction from the ground up. So they do much more testing. Now, why ever that is, I don't know, but that's the loophole.
Although I understand the Mott Haven Educational Campus had a similar situation, and the DOE had to be forced in the South Bronx to really do a study.
I think a combination of that Mott Haven campus and the Bronx New School, these recent things that have gotten a lot of publicity, has forced a hand at the DOE and the School Construction Authority to do more extensive testing at 31 leased sites. That still leaves the problem of if the Department of Education is hoping to create 30,000 new seats for children in the next few years, they're not going to build 30,000 seats worth of schools. They're going to have to lease and renovate buildings.
And so these buildings are out there.
So we really want to see a change in that legislation going forward.
Well, that's the next, led right into the perfect next question for Mr. Siegel then. So do we have the legislation that we need? Is there enough teeth in it to make sure that, buildings are properly investigated before children are in it? Lenny Siegel, what do you think?
No, there's no requirement that parents.
There's no requirement?
The parents be informed about what contamination might be at a leased school. Sometimes they address it, and sometimes they don't. The one thing you have to realize that, I've been involved at about a dozen New York City schools providing technical assistance to parents and teachers, and all but 2 of those have tetrachloroethylene, a different chemical, dry cleaning chemical, of unknown origin underneath, and the 2 that don't have TCE, the one we're talking about at PS 51, of known origin. This is a common problem, and any time they build a school, not only should they be doing an environmental site assessment and doing sampling, but they should be communicating to the public exactly what they've done. Sometimes they've done it right, but there's no guarantee, and the best guarantee that the kids are going to be protected is informing the community and the parents and letting them comment on what's going on.
The elephant in the room, as I feel right now, it's sitting right here in the room, is, is there another agenda other than making sure children are safe? What everybody's suggesting is that, the authorities, the people at DOE and maybe others have an agenda that says, well, we need a building, we really would rather not tell the truth. Is that really what is apparent here, Mr. Siegel? Do you have Yeah, go ahead.
This is a national problem, and what it comes down to is when people want to build schools, they have a hard time getting money. And when you start to investigate a site, if you're delayed by the possibility of contamination, and you're deciding whether to build there because of the contamination, that might cause you to lose money for that particular site. So we have a system which doesn't look at the environmental conditions before the decision is made to site a school at any particular location. Because of that, this is a recurring problem.
Legislation, is proposed legislation out there?
I was like holding it
jumping
back.
out of her seat. She wants to tell me about legislation.
Yes, because the bottom line is that the Department of Education has just been very, very negligent, and always is negligent as far as how far they notify parents and include parents.
And so
in
you
any
think
process.
they have to be
Yes,
told?
so there is a bill that was introduced in regards to
Statewide?
yeah, I believe so. Statewide, that
This is the City Council of New York.
City Council, right? So
City Council.
citywide. Fine, thank you,
Citywide.
Mr. Siegel.
yeah, that
That's
would-
why we brought you here.
Yeah, that would help. That would enforce the Department of Education to actually notify parents in a timely manner when there's any investigation around any environmental issues that are happening in our schools.
Do you have a sense of, let's just say that the study does show, the worst situation, that children really were contaminated, et cetera, yet happily my daughter is old and older and grown, and Ms. Haar and her family and her children are grown and seemingly healthy. Are these the kinds of things that come about later? In other words, it seems to be a very specious thing. It's not like, you walk in, you get a cold, and you go home and you start sneezing. This sounds like it'll take a while to find the truth.
Yes, but this
Am I right about that?
Yeah, but this health
That's true
report
for
would
some of
actually, yes, but this health report would actually help us to be able to know what to do in the future. Not even our physicians, not even our local hospitals are being notified in regards to what has happened, the contamination, and what even to do about it.
Mr. Siegel, go ahead. You wanted to weigh in on that.
Yeah, and exposure increases risk. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to get sick.
Okay.
But some of the health endpoints, like cancer, where the risk is increased, and you could be increased by this and then something else that people do, doesn't manifest itself for 20 or 30 years. So it's important that everybody who was there and exposed for any length of time know that, so that they have an unusual health condition, and the doctors are trying to figure out what caused it. They could say, this is one more thing you should know that might have caused this for me. And one of the disappointments now is that the Department of Education seems to have made no effort at all to develop a list of people who worked or studied at the school.
Well, that to me would be really upsetting. I mean, I know that my daughter did, but there could be children who grew up, or families that might have moved away, or people who worked in the school for a very long time and had no idea, maybe not in New York, and so they're not watching BronxTalk tonight, so they have no idea. It would be nice, I guess, if they do that. What's the outreach to the Department of Education showing so far? Mr. Siegel, go ahead.
Well, my understanding is they just say, oh, it's too hard. And there's no question it's difficult to develop a list.
Well,
And it's not that we aren't asking them to give the parents, the activists, a copy of the list. We just want them to send information to whomever they can reach
Right.
who was at the school.
But we're actually requesting that they actually give that list to the Department of Health.
to the Department of Health.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to go to you or to the NWBCCC.
Right. So they can
Lois
disseminate
Haar,
the
you've
information.
been a veteran of many of these kinds of advocacies and things. What's your perspective on what should be done and how this should play out? Even short of having a report, seems to me those things need to happen now, regardless of what a report shows or doesn't
Well,
show.
my sense is that in the short time I've been involved, and the parents who've been doing this for another year longer, or at least than I have, is that it's already moved them and pushed them. If we wouldn't have heard anything from anybody, if nobody had done some organizing and demanded meetings and made phone calls and called elected officials. And I myself spoke with one of the people at the Department of Health, and she had been saying all along, well, and then finally she said, well, we expect the report's going to be out in May. And when I reported that back at a meeting, people said, oh, that's news. And so I think it's the fruit of organizing is always that you get somebody to move, you get a reaction. Now the next thing is that when this full report does come out, that they do meet with the community in a way that makes sense, that we can really advertise it in a big way and get a big turnout of people so that it can be translated for people and explained what the meaning is, because it is technical, jargony kind of
You
stuff.
know, I'm just thinking in this case, I'm putting my parents' hat on. It seems to me if, you know, the report, whatever the report shows, I'd like to know that I can have my daughter go to some health official and be evaluated, you know, as part of a group effort, so that they would know these are the things we might look for in all of the children. Plus, that probably would help them accumulate statistics to say, well, a certain percentage might be showing this, this, and this. But of course, that it's just us talking here. Mr. Siegel, is that what happens in these cases? That sometimes there is kind of a health action?
Usually people want a health study, but unless you can develop information on who was at the school when, for most of the people, those percentage statistics don't do a lot of good, because basically you attract reports from people who got sick rather than a control group. So it's more important that people know about it so they can consult with their physicians.
So it sounds like,
something comes up.
regardless of what the report might show, that list is vital, and that would be number one. Number two, of course, then would be to get the report, and number three then would be, you know, some kind of action, regardless of the direction that legislation goes. Mr. Siegel, we're just at the end of the show. We want to thank you for your participation and taking some time out.
Well, I'm really impressed by these parents. They
So
took a difficult situation, and they're making the government respond.
You now have a dose of the Bronx that you never had before. That's how we are. Lois Haar, what do you think? Where are we at now? What's next for you in this effort?
Right. Well, it's to stick with it. I mean, I think that's the tried and true answer about organizing, is to stay on it and to make sure that people know that we're still watching and listening and demanding things from them, and to try to be sure that they're held to the. You know, they first said to me, oh, we expect it to be out in mid-May, and then, oh, late May, and then, oh, in June. So now, in the next couple of weeks, you know, we'll just have to start calling. And she talked about the powers that be, or the other higher authorities, and we said, well, we'll call them, too.
Jeanette Sosa, for people who are parents who children went to PS 51, or if they're concerned about their school building, what do they do? We have about 15 seconds.
Well, they could definitely go on Facebook, and they could look up PS 51 Parents United, and they can communicate with us there. We've
got the website up on the screen right now.
We're also having, May 14th, we're having our next PS 51 Parents United meeting.
Okay, and you can find out about that on the Facebook page and the website and everything. Well, thank you so much, Lenny Siegel. Thank you, Jeanette Sosa, Lois Haar. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
And we hope we have no more situations like this, and we'd like to clear up this situation as soon as we can. If you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. You can also make a comment on our Facebook page. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. You can see all the old shows. And if you want to, you can become a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook and know exactly what we've got going on. Next week, our guest will be the Comptroller of the City of New York, who is also a candidate for mayor. John Liu will come back to the show. We won't take phone calls during that show, but if you want to ask the Comptroller something, send us an email at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we will try and get that into the show. Thanks to Jane, the producer. Thanks to Dina. Thanks to Shirley. Thanks to the cast of thousands, and thanks to you. Good night.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants